Well, hello there. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to part of the Festival in a Box 2.0. This is the blending session. I hope you're all well. I hope you're enjoying the festival so far with all the pre-recorded interviews and tastings that we've done for the event. And this is part of the live act, as it were. We did the barbecue and cocktail session last night, and tonight we're doing blending. Now, obviously, I could show you how to blend it my way anyway, on my own, but for some reason, I decided it'd be a good idea to bring my dad into it. Now, I really don't know how this is going to go, because there's two things that my dad doesn't do. That is technology and whiskey. So we're in for an interesting evening, I think. And yes, it should be fun. And that's what it's all about, really, to be honest. It's not, we're not going to create the world's best blended whiskey here. We're just going to have a bit of fun. And perhaps it's something you can take with you in your future whiskey journey, if you like. So I'm just going to bring my dad in just now so you can see him and he can confirm his identity. Hello, Daddy.
Hello, Edward.
I
think he's invited me to do this on the basis of if I can do this, anybody can.
Yes, exactly. I don't want to say idiot-proof because that would be derogatory towards you, Daddy, and I would never do anything like that.
Yes.
Can you just confirm? I mean, it's fairly obvious. I think if you did facial recognition software, we would probably confuse a lot of machines. But confirm that you are actually my father.
Well, I can say it, can't I? I can't prove it at this minute, but yes, I am your father, Edward.
I don't think anyone's going to demand you drop your drawers or anything like that, Daddy. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to do some blending, Daddy. It's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy it. And hopefully you're going to enjoy the result of your labors. Now, first of all, what we're going to do is we're going to taste a very nice blended Scotch whiskey called Chivas Regal 12 years old. So have you poured yourself a little bit of that, Daddy?
I will do.
Okay. I'm going to stop calling you Daddy, Dad, because I don't normally call you that.
Yes. Well, you like.
Yeah.
Just glass here.
Good. So you've poured yourself a little bit of that. So let's stick our nose into it, have a little sniff. Remember, sniff it gently, Dad. Don't treat it like a wine. Just breathe it in nicely. Let it wash over you. Now, Chivas Regal, like I say, is a very well put together blended Scotch whiskey. 12 years old, this version. The roots of Chivas Regal go back almost as far as blending itself to John and James Chivas in Aberdeen, who were among the pioneers of blending. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So let's have a little taste.
Taste it? Can I taste it?
Mm-hmm. Now, what some of you, well, most of you won't realize is my dad is actually in France. Chivas Regal would be quite a popular whiskey in France. But he's an hour ahead there, and he's sacrificed his dinner time for us this evening. So if you can just give him some recognition for that, he would really appreciate it.
And some fine.
Now, before we get started with the blending, what I wanted to suggest is that you've got 5 different component parts plus the 2 blends that we're going to taste, and we're tasting one of them at the moment. What would be helpful, if while I'm giving you a little bit of lowdown about blending and its history, is to get yourself a glass for each of those so that we can just do a little nosing of each of those component parts. They don't have to be Glencairn glasses. You might not have that many already, but maybe 5 wine glasses would be okay. That's what my dad's got there. all different shapes and sizes, which is great. So yeah. So I'm just gonna take you out for a bit, Dad.
That's all right.
I'll see you in a little while. Okay, so how did blended Scotch whisky come about, and what's the state of the Scotch whisky market at the minute? Well, these days in the UK, many people still view blended Scotch whisky as the poorer relation to the likes of single malt whisky, which is a shame, and it's actually completely untrue. What is true is that there are some pretty god-awful blended Scotch whiskies on the market, but they tend to be of the type which has a very low malt content, very young whiskies involved, and really perhaps no care put into them. They're blended and bottled to reach a certain price point, and therefore, they're not really the kind of whiskies we want to be drinking. However, when blended Scotch is done right, it can be absolutely sensational. And I've tasted, as you can imagine, well, must be thousands and thousands of whiskies. And amongst those, some of the best whiskies I've ever tasted have been blended Scotch whiskies. And why have they been the best whiskies? Because blending really is an art form. It's something that is quite difficult. We're breaking it down into 5 whiskies here, whereas most master blenders will work with hundreds of samples in order to reach the blend that they want to achieve. Obviously, we couldn't fit that many samples in your pack, so I hope you appreciate that we've kept it down to the 5. Now, the history of blending, like I say, blended Scotch whisky used to be the style of whiskey, the category, if you like, that used to be held aloft on a pedestal, and it still is in certain parts of the world, such as India, where the likes of Johnnie Walker is very highly revered and very highly sought after. And it was the same really in most of the world up until the advent of single malts, really in the 1960s. But blended Scotch whiskies were very much seen as the thing to drink. And part of the reason was that single malt whiskies of the time, back in the mid 1800s, was not particularly drinkable on its own. It would quite often contain very rough edges. It might be quite peaty, quite smoky, and not necessarily something that you would necessarily drink on its own. So really, when grain distillation was, or continuous distillation was invented and perfected in 1830 by an Irishman called Aeneas Coffey, it provided the impetus for a whiskey revolution. So you had suddenly this capacity, this ability to blend not only single malts together, but adding grain whiskey. And to explain, well, what we might do here, Dad, if you want to follow along, is the first whiskey I want you to pour a tiny sample of into one of the auxiliary glasses is the neutral and clean. So you can see I've literally just the bottom of the glass, because you'll need that for later. Now, this is a blended grain whiskey, but essentially very similar to a single grain whiskey. And we're going to put our nose in that. Now, you've already tasted the Chivas 12, which is a lovely, fruity, vibrant, sweet blended whiskey. Now, when you smell the neutral and clean, what does it smell of? The answer would be not a great deal. It's exactly as it says on the tin, or on the bottle in this case. It is neutral and it's clean. There's no discernible rough edges, but there's very little discernible at all. It just smells really of slightly aged alcohol, which is essentially what it is. Now, if we take the Coastal and Peaty, which is the far right of your selection, should be anyway, Coastal and Peaty. So we're going to pour a little bit of this. Now, this isn't one of the most peated single malts. that I've ever tasted or you've ever tasted. But when contrasting with the neutral and clean, you should hopefully see, this is more like what they would have been dealing with before the advent of grain whiskey and blended Scotch whiskey. You should smell it immediately. It's very pungent in comparison to the neutral and clean. Almost smells like a completely different product, which it pretty much is. Grain whiskey is made in a completely different way using a continuous distillation method, which is exactly the same method you use to make grain spirit for the likes of gin and vodka and so on. So it really is aggressively distilled up to around 95% alcohol, just under 95% alcohol. Whereas single malt whiskey is, in comparison, very gently distilled in the copper pot stills. The slightly more romantic notion of distillation, up to around 70% alcohol. And if you imagine that the percentage left over after the alcohol is extracted is where the flavor lies, then you can start to understand why grain whiskey doesn't taste as much as single malt whiskey. Now, that's not to say there aren't any really good single grain whiskies. There's tons of them. There's really good young grain whiskies from South Africa, from Baines, from the James Sedgwick distillery. There's some really lovely Irish single grain whiskies that are quite young as well. So you can drink them young. And then you get older Scotch grain whiskies from the likes of North British and Girvan and so on. And often they are the value in the whiskey world. If you want a 25, 26, 27-year-old grain whiskey, it's generally going to cost you maybe a quarter of what it would for a single malt of a similar vintage. So definitely keep an eye out for single grain whiskies. Now, so really blended Scotch whiskey started to expand at the back end of the 20th century, the 19th century, so the late 1800s. And there were several reasons for that. One of which was that the cognac industry was absolutely devastated by a horrid little vine-killing pest called Phylloxera vastatrix, which essentially made its way through Western European vineyards and destroyed them. It ate them from the root outwards, and meant that the entire vine stocks of Western Europe, or most of Western Europe, was completely wiped out, including those in Cognac and Armagnac, which meant that the most favored brown spirit or dark spirit of the time, which was Cognac, was suddenly at risk. At the same time, the Scotch whiskey producers had started to introduce the blended whiskies. So the grocers, like John Walker and James and Chivas and George Ballantyne and so on, these grocers had developed their own blends and created brands from those blends, which we now know today, as Chivas Regal, Johnny Walker, Ballantynes, and so on. But they started as very, grocers to the well-to-do of the areas, selling teas and coffees and chocolates and cocoa and whatever else, that the luxury products of the time, before dabbling in blending whiskey themselves. But by the time that phylloxera wiped out and completely devastated cognac, these Scotch whiskey producers were ready to kick down the door to the global market, and soon filled the gap that cognac had left behind with the Scotch whiskies, blended Scotch whiskies. And that's the way it remained for many, many years. And really, as I mentioned before, it was really only in the 1960s with the advent of single malt whiskey, which was introduced by Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, and Gordon and MacPhail, who were extremely pioneering in introducing single malts to the world. Before this, it was all about the blended whiskey. then since then, particularly in the UK, particularly in areas where whiskey is mature, if you like, the whiskey market is knowledgeable and mature. Single malts have really taken over as the choice of the connoisseur, if that's what you want to call it, which is a shame. Like I say, because there's still some excellent blended Scotch whiskies about, and they're very much worth looking at. Don't dismiss things just because it says blended Scotch whiskey on it, and give everything a try once at least. Anyway, so I know it's a very brief and potted history. There's much more to it than that, but we've only got an hour. Well, we did have an hour. I'd rather get going with get my dad back in and start this the blending process. So I'm going to bring Dad back in. You okay, Dad?
So I've drunk all the Chivas Regal as you suggested.
I don't think I suggested you drink all of it, but fair enough. You're having a little party to yourself there.
All right, let's get on with
it. Yes, Daddy. Right. So we've already had a little nose of the neutral and clean and the coastal and peaty. So what I suggest we do first of all is pour a tiny measure of each of the other three. So the light and delicate, the floral and fruity. And it's really just enough to nose, because most of you will be aware that your nose is the single most important organ when it comes to tasting, actually. Without it, you would be able to taste nothing whatsoever. So I've poured a little bit of each one. Have you done that, Dad?
Yes.
You're still doing it?
No, I've done it now.
Well, okay, good. So why don't we start again with the neutral and clean? And again, we're just nosing. We're not tasting. We don't necessarily need to taste at this point. And again, the neutral and clean, even after drinking or tasting the Chivas 12-year-old, really smells of nothing, doesn't it, Dad?
It's a bit like what I fire my model engines on.
Oh dear, we had to bring the railways into it, didn't we? For those of you not aware, my father is a keen. What would you call yourself, Dad?
I don't know. Steam railway enthusiast.
Amateur or professional? I think you.
Other things. Anyway,
I think you've been doing it long enough to call yourself a professional. For now, right. So we smelled the neutral and clean. It's really the grain whiskey is really the and you'll relate to this. It's like the canvas upon which you paint the single malts. Okay, mm-hmm. So it's what's going to help the single malts spring to life and produce the blend that we want. Now, let's have a little nose of the light and delicate.
Single malt.
Yeah, so this is a single malt. Now, these are single malts, as I said, from named distilleries. The reason we don't put the name of the distillery on there is partly because this is exactly the same way a master blender would work. So they would use descriptives instead of distillery names, because really for blending purposes, they're not actually interested in which distillery is providing the whiskey. It's more about the flavor rather than the branding and everything else that goes about it. So what are you getting in the light and delicate, Daddy?
Light and delicate, Edward.
Good. Following the party.
I'm not sure I have the vocabulary to describe it.
That's okay. Well, that's why it says light and delicate, so you don't have to. But it is.
Or is one just sniffing it?
Just nose it. I don't think you need to taste it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, noses, as it says on the tin, it is light and it is delicate. It's a little bit more flavor or aroma than the neutral and clean, but it's not anything that's going to blow your socks off. All right, let's have a little nose of the floral and fruity. And as you'll be able to tell by now that we're kind of going up in the aroma stakes as we go through these 5 whiskies. So we start with a very, very light whiskey, and we're starting to get a little bit more character every step. So that's something to consider for when we come to the blending aspect here.
That makes my eyes water a bit more than the last one.
I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing, Daddy.
No, it does.
Yeah, so the fruits in there, I get a kind of slightly stewed fruit, so maybe like a apple crumble or something like that. Maybe a little bit of delicate spice. Now, we'll next go to the
touch of apricot.
Say that again, Daddy.
Touch of apricot.
A touch of apricot. Very good. Check you out. Okay, so we'll go to the creamy and toffee. And it really does smell like creamy toffee, doesn't it? It's kind of fudgy. There's still a little bit of fruit as well, although it's probably more sort of burnt citrus rather than fresh fruit. But quite interesting. And then finally, let's have another nose of the Coastal and Peaty. Yeah, and you definitely, as soon as you put your nose in that, you get that waft.
Yeah, that's the big difference.
You get that kind of little waft of peat smoke in there, Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that
iodine.
Yes. So that's from a distillery that's using barley that has been treated in a very traditional manner, which is to say it's been dried over a peat fire as opposed to being oven or air dried as most malted barley is these days. Obviously, there is a resurgence, and there are lots of people who love peated single malts, myself included. And actually, the demand for that type of whiskey has crept up. Well, it hasn't crept up; it's just gone like this. So,
well, stronger ones than this, aren't there?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean this actually is quite gentle on the peat Richter scale, as it were. It would be. Compared to something like Laphroaig or Ardbeg, it's very gentle, really. Now, so we've nosed all 5 of the component whiskies to put together into the blend. Now, there are a few rules, a handful of rules regarding your blend. Whether you stick to those rules or not is entirely up to you. But it'd be great if you could. So the first one is that you must use, or your blend must contain at least 50% grain whiskey. Okay, so when we come to make up the final blend, 50 ml of that 100 ml must be grain whiskey, and the reason for that is that it creates an even playing field. I know we're not in a huge competition here. We can't be. We can't, unfortunately, taste each other's whiskies. But it also reflects a little bit more realistically the makeup of a blended Scotch whiskey, a commercial blended Scotch whiskey. The Chivas 12 that we tasted there is roughly 40% malt whiskey and then 60% grain whiskey. In that 40% malt whiskey will be around a dozen, maybe more, maybe slightly less, single malts that have gone into that. Okay, so we're going to go 50 ml grain whiskey, and then the rest of it will be the single malts. Now, we're not going to use the measuring cylinder just yet. That's really for when we're ready to do the final push, as it were. What we're going to do is we're going to build it up in a glass of your choosing. So I'm going to use one of these Glencans, and you should have a pipette which is graduated to 3 ml. And we're going to build up the easiest way to do it is to build up a 20 ml measure of your blend, and then we're going to expand it to 100 mils once you get to the point where you're happy enough with it. So what we'll need in that case is it's not the easiest to get the completely accurate. So that's 2 mils.
So you suggest starting with 2 mils?
No, I'm just talking aloud as I'm working, Daddy. So you really need 10 mils in total of the grain. That's 4, 6, 8.
10 mils of the grain in the glass.
Yeah.
3 threes are 9 and 1's 10, but you can't do it like that. Wish you can.
Okay, so I'm just thinking. I think I might have to divide it up between 2 glasses, because otherwise we're not going to have enough grain whiskey to make the blend. So we'll make a 10 mil blend. Okay, so we've got. So I've changed. Dad, you're frozen. Are you right there?
I'm all right. I'm just frozen, wondering what to do next. I've just put 3. You want me to build it up to 10?
Can you? Well, no. Can you put 5 mils in one and 5 mils in the other? So we've got two glasses there. So we'll make two blends, miniature blends.
Right, that's 5 in that one. Yes. 3. I've done 3 plus 2.
Oh, that's fine. It doesn't matter which way you do it. Now, in terms of the blend itself, you might want to experiment. Well, you are going to experiment. It really depends on your taste. You know, if you prefer something that's more fruity and delicate and so on, then you might. Well, you're probably wanting to use more of those 2 whiskies. If you're wanting something a little bit more robust and a little bit more chewy, if you like, then you might want to use a bit more of the creamy and toffee and maybe a little of the coastal and peaty. Just to forewarn you that the coastal and peaty, even though it's not on the maximum peat pungency Richter scale, it will affect your blend quite significantly with even just the merest drop. So you kind of treat it like seasoning, like or like pepper, you know, just almost grinding a bit over the top, just to give it a little bit more oomph, if you like.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Do we have to use all 5 in the blend?
Yes, that's one of the other rules, is that even if you use only a tiny drop of one of those whiskies, you should use at least a little of each of them. Obviously, it's going to be dominated probably by one particularly, but yeah, you should definitely use a little bit of each. And the other thing,
as you split this between 2 glasses, does that mean we're doing 2 separate blends or the same in both of them?
No, you're going to do 2 different ones, and the one that you like the best will then build into the big blend, if you like. So what we're going to do then is start having some fun. Start adding some single malt to the canvas that you've put into the glass already. So you might want to put, like I say, 2 mils of light and delicate in, and then 1 or 2 mils of floral and fruity, and then maybe half a mil of the creamy and toffee and the coastal and peaty. It's very, very small quantities, obviously, at this point. So that's what I'm.
This way I've got to make a note of what I've put in.
Yeah. So if you write down on your paper in front of you, Dad. So we've put in 5 mil of the grain.
Grain, yes. And in both number 1 and number 2.
Yes, that's right. So you've got 1 and 2. Okay.
Is everybody writing this down?
I hope so. It's very handy. Yeah. Right. Now I'm going to go with in my mind, I'm not going to use a huge amount of coastal and peaty or creamy and toffee for the first one. I want something nice, gentle, fruity. So I'm going to go
first one and do our own in the second one.
Well, you can follow along, or you can just go your own way. You know, that's the beauty.
I think I'd like to follow you for the first one.
Okay.
My own for the second one.
Okay. Right. So I've got 2 mil of light and delicate, and I'm going to put that in glass 1, along with the 5 mils of neutral and clean that's already in there. Then I'm going to take. Have you done that, Daddy?
No, still trying to judge 2 exactly.
Yeah, it's.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So then I'm going to take. I haven't quite got 2 mil there. 2 mils of the floral and fruity. Yeah. And into glass 1 again.
You're a rapid operator, Edward.
I'll try and slow down a bit. Well, what I was going to say was actually, while you're doing that, Dad, is that undoubtedly everyone will have a preference for the single malt amongst these that they like the best. But what I would say to you is try and put that aside, because once you've blended these whiskies, you know, the characteristic of the blend will be quite different to the single malt. Even if you dumped all of floral and fruity, for example, into the clean and neutral, it wouldn't taste of the floral and fruity anymore. It would taste of a blend. So preferences aside, and it's really all about building the best blend rather than the best single malt. So that was 2 mil light and delicate, 2 mil floral and fruity. So that's up to, that should be up to 9 mil now. Now this is going to be, well, no, it is marked, so we can do that. So I'm going to go creamy and toffee, and I'm going to try and get 0.5 mil. Which is the bottom rung on the pipette, which you can just about see.
Yes.
So I'm going to do that. Okay.
That looks like very little in proportion, but you know what you're doing.
Well,
you do, don't you?
Some might say. So I'm going to put.
That's half.
Yeah. And then I'm going to get the same again of the coastal and peaty.
Good Lord. This is very fine.
Yeah. It's.
Does this approximate to a blend that you've done before, or is this entirely?
No, this is just an idea I had for the first blend, really. Right. So that's 0.5 mil coastal and peaty.
Sorry, I've got a bobble in here.
Oh dear. Now, there are only 5 whiskies here, but there are infinite combinations even with 5 whiskies, because obviously, you know, the quantities can be adjusted to the nth degree if you had a really complex measuring device, unlike this particular pipette. So I've got 0.5 mil creamy and toffee, and 1/2 ml of the coastal and peaty.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so take the pipette and just give the 10 mils that it should be. So it should look something like that. Or obviously, maybe in a different glass. Just give it a little bit. I mean, in reality, blenders would allow that blend to marry together over a period of time to let it settle down. Unfortunately, we don't have that time. We've got to get on with it. So take your glass and let's have a nose of it. If you like, you can compare it to the Chivas next to it, which is why I've kept a bit of it.
Oh, yeah, kept a bit. Didn't keep any.
Now, Chivas Regal doesn't contain any peated single malts whatsoever. So you can see that even that 1/2 ml of the coastal and peaty, particularly when you smell it next to the Chivas, has really made quite an impact.
Well,
What do you think?
Yes, I didn't keep the Chivas, unfortunately.
You didn't drink all of the Chivas, did you, Dad?
But next to the clean and neutral, it's a big difference, of course.
Yeah, seriously, did you finish that?
No. But I've not got a glass, a spare glass.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I can tell you, and I'm sure the folks at home can agree that the
I believe.
difference is quite palpable. I quite like it, actually. I'm going to give it a taste. Mm. Mm. Yeah. I'm actually quite pleased with that, Dad. What do you think?
Oh, it's brilliant.
It's incredible. Yeah, no, I quite like that. Okay, so that's if you followed that along at home, which wasn't compulsory, but hopefully you can if you have done, you can see the effect of the different whiskies. But especially that coastal and peaty, that 1/2 ml has really made it's brought it to life. So without that, I think it would have been maybe a little bit flat, maybe not quite had enough oomph. But that's my taste. I like a little bit of peat at least, just to balance the sweetness.
Chivas again.
You're going to taste the Chivas again, are you?
Yes,
Okay.
Because you told me.
When have you done anything I've told you to do or asked you to do?
Well, I'm on air, Edward, so.
In fact, when have you done anything that anyone's told you to do or asked you to do?
Oh, Francois is downstairs doing the ironing.
It's good to see that traditional roles are still alive and well in the Ludlow senior household.
I did offer.
She's not ironing your Y fronts, I hope.
I hope not.
Okay, so why don't we go for the freestyle blend now, Dad?
Can I say?
Yes.
Coastal and peaty really does come through, isn't it? In comparison with the Chivas.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah. Yes. So there will be some people, their palates are much more sensitive to peat, who really don't like any kind of peat in their whiskey, and Chivas is perfect for that because it doesn't have that.
It's very
Whereas
smooth. Very smooth.
It's very smooth. That's right. It's kind of a breakfast whiskey. Whereas some people might like a little bit of edge to it. So blends like Johnnie Walker Black Label, for example, is very well known for actually being quite slightly smoky, probably a little bit more smoky than what we've created there. If you didn't follow that recipe, I can just show it to you here. So can you see that? Hold on, let me just do that. So it was 5 ml grain, 2 ml clean, light and delicate, 2 ml fresh floral and fruity, then 1/2 ml of the other two, the creamy and toffee and the coastal and peaty. So if you want a tip, that's definitely a nice way of doing it. So Dad, are you ready to go freestyle?
Yes.
Having had a little play with that first one.
Yes.
And then
I'm wondering if I'll be able to do one that doesn't get very strongly coastal and peaty. If that was only 1/2 ml in that first one, it's going to have a big influence, isn't it?
well, yeah, I mean, if you really wanted to and you didn't want to include the coastal and peaty, you can. You know, I'm not going to how should we say, I'm not going to hold it against you. Well, not forever. Not forever anyway.
Question, that's all.
Yeah. So why don't we having another nose of that? That's rather nice. So what do you think? What's your thoughts? Have you got any?
I want to increase the creamy and toffee because that sounds. I like cream. I like toffee. So that's good to me.
Yes, but just bear in mind what I said before, which is it won't necessarily behave in the same way once it's blended with other whiskies.
No.
So maybe start with your creamy and toffee so that you see how it behaves with the grain. I would suggest you don't do any more than 2 or 3 mils.
No, I wouldn't do more than 2. I don't think.
Okay.
Maybe 2.5. But
I tell you what. I tell you what we'll do, Dad, is I will follow your recipe now.
Oh Lord.
And then we can see which is the best.
I said at the outset, before we went on air, as it were, is this a test? To which my son replied, no, not at all. Now it's a test. Okay.
No. It's become a competition, not a test.
Well, it's a similar sort of thing, isn't it?
Right. So what? 2 mil.
Two of creamy and toffee.
Right. Hold on.
But I have no idea what these things taste like in blend, you see, because this is an experiment, isn't it? And
it's part of the fun.
Yes.
Okay, so I've got slightly less now.
That's 2. I'm going to put it in now, okay?
Okay, I'm a bit behind. I'm struggling to get down to 2.
Oh dear. It's bubbles.
Yeah, it's not the easiest, is it? Right, so that's 2 mil
creamy and toffee.
Creamy and toffee, yep.
I'm going to stick with 1/2 of coastal and peaty.
Oh, really?
Yes. Well, I can't get less than that, can I?
Well, you could approximate 1/4, couldn't you? If you look at
no, 1/2. That's okay.
So 2 mil cream and toffee, 1/2.
1/2 is the last marking on the pipette, did you say?
Yes.
Yes, right. Okay, it's going in.
Hold on. You're ahead of me now, Dad, honestly.
Well, this is from running fine-scale live steam locomotives. So that's 1/2 of coastal and peaty.
Yeah, gotcha.
If others watching this want to use this same, and there's no copyright on it, you can.
Not yet. Yeah, I would hope that they're freestyling, Dad. I don't want them to follow my recipe and your recipe. I'd like them to do their own recipe, really.
Sorry.
Not least because I think this is going to be a disaster. But okay, so we've got another 2.5 mil. We need.
Oh dear. How many are we up to? 4.5 so far. Very long.
No, you're up to 2.5 plus your 5 mil of grain, aren't you? So it should be 7.5.
All right. Yes, I forgot to write that down. 5 grain. Then 2 of
2 creamy and toffee and half.
So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and a half. Right, so we just need a half of something then, which must be the floral and fruity, presumably. Have I done something wrong here? So we have 1 1/2 of floral and fruit.
You could do 1 1/2, yeah.
And a half of light and delicate. How about that?
Okay. Well, it's up to you. This is your blend, Dad.
It's more maths here than
yes, it definitely appeals to the inner scientist or whatever.
Yeah.
So 1 1/2 floral and fruity.
Yes. Now where is that 1 1/2? I see it. I see it. Down. This is like the water level in the boiler.
Everything. It's all about the trains.
Yep.
So that was 1 1/2 floral and fruity.
Going in.
And then
half of light and delicate.
Half of light and delicate. Okay, I think I'm there.
Oh, you're ahead of me now. I've got like a light and delicate in yet.
I hope the viewers at home are enjoying this because it's one of the best things I've ever done. Okay. Well, we should be there then, Dad. That should be it. So 5 ml grain.
Just hang on a second. I'm having difficulty with my bubbles. Right. Right. That's it. What shall we call it, Edward?
Well, that's up to you. That's up to you. That's part of the fun. Maybe give it a steam engine themed name or something, couldn't you?
Well,
right. Have you given it a stir?
I haven't given it a stir. No, I will do.
I'll give it a little stir. I'll give it a nose. Maybe smell it compared to the first one.
Can I taste it?
Of course. Mm.
I think that's
Well, I'm glad you like it, Dad.
Don't you like it?
I still prefer mine because I think it's more balanced,
Mm-hmm.
and it's got a fruitier characteristic, which I like. Whereas yours is a bit more, how should we say, dark, brooding.
It's quite smooth. Isn't it quite smooth, or am I?
Neither is unpleasant. This has to be said. Well, I'm. So, which one are you going to bottle, Dad?
Mine.
So you're going to make yours, are you?
Not to say I like it better, but I think I would like, mine in the bottles.
Okay. Right. Well, shall we start to make up the blend in the? Oh, I nearly threw away my lighting. So let's start off by putting the remainder of the neutral and clean.
So that's the 10 of this then into there.
Well, it's basically the whole thing, Dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I've got a lot less. Okay. So that measures where it comes up to, but doesn't.
Into the measuring jug, Dad. Measuring cylinder. Now, what you might find is that there's a little bit less than 50 ml.
It's 40.
You've got a 40, right? Okay. So what we're going to have to do is adjust the quantities ever so slightly. I've got 45, which is bizarre. I don't quite know how that's happened.
It's times 8, isn't
No, it's times 5. So it's times 10. Times 10. So we made up 10 mil. We made up 10 mil, and now we're making up 100 mil.
it?
So
Yes.
each of your miniatures, if you like, should be times by 10.
But as I've only got 40,
But as you've only got 40, you're gonna have to adjust that ever so slightly, aren't you?
yes. I'll
So
do it on my calculator.
yes, exactly. So I think times by 4 would be right.
Yes.
Yeah. So you would be.
I can do 8 times, sorry, 4.
No, times 8, not times 4. What am I talking
I can
about?
do 2 times 8 in my head, would you believe, even after the whiskey. So for me, it's 8 of creamy and toffee.
No, it's 16, isn't it?
Oh, I
It's
double.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, 2 times 8, that's right. 16.
Yeah. I thought you said you could do it after that whiskey. Clearly you can't.
2 times a half equals 1. 2 times 1.5 equals 3. Half times 2 equals 1. That's right. So personally speaking, I now need 16 of creamy and toffee.
Yeah. So I'm going to put 20 mil light and delicate into mine. So that's going to take it to 65.
So 56 it should be, shouldn't it?
Well, that's a funny noise, isn't it?
Yeah. Do you know, that's almost dead on. Would you believe
Oh.
that?
I do believe it. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to put an extra 5 mil of floral and fruity to make up for the 5 mil of grain that I was short, just so that we can make sure I've got 100 mil.
Coastal and peachy equals 1. I can use this for the 1, can't I? The bet, because that's.
Right, so I'll take it. So this will take it from 65 to 90. Yep. And then I then did 0.5 mil, which translates to 5 mil when you times it by 10. So that's that.
You didn't tell me there was physical exercise involved in this.
Yeah, I forgot this would probably be the most you've done all week. And then, right, there we go. How are you getting on?
Doesn't seem to be anywhere near 100 though.
Well, no, you're going to have to make 80, aren't you? Because you started with 40.
Yes, light and delicate.
As I said earlier, it's not an exact. This isn't an exact science. We're making the best of what's in front of us. Okay, can you give this a little stir? And my hope is that the blend we've made in the larger format will taste exactly like the blend previous. I'm going to put you on solo, Dad, while I go and get another glass, believe it or not, and the viewers can see what you're up to.
Oh dear.
In all your.
I have to recalculate. 5. Actually, 5 grain. That's 10.
Right.
I think something's wrong in my calculations.
Just go with your gut, Dad.
Yeah, we put 40 in there to start with, right? Because I was short from 50.
Yes.
So
Instead of timesing everything, multiplying everything by 10, you needed to
Yeah.
multiply by 8,
yes,
so that you would actually get to 80 ml of the right whiskey, as opposed to 100 ml of the wrong whiskey.
3, 1. Well, I don't know if I thought I'd done it right, but it suddenly comes up to 60.
Well,
I told you this was a bad idea.
and what have you done? What have you done exactly?
Well, I put 40 in there of the clean and neutral.
Yes.
Great. And
Yeah.
then the rest, which we put 5 of in the first one, so that's times 8, isn't it?
Yes.
8, put 2 of the creamy and toffee in the first one, times 8 is 16.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what I've done now. Right, I'll catch up with you. 8, 4.
Right. Well, in the meantime, I've transferred my blend from the measuring cylinder into the wee bottles, and I'm going to pour a small sample into the glass and compare it to the blend that I made in miniature, and hopefully they're not too dissimilar. They are slightly different, it has to be said.
Is this yours or mine you're tasting?
No, I made up mine, the first one we did. Actually, they're pretty similar. They're pretty similar. There is a touch more of the floral and fruity single malt because I didn't have enough grain. It's a hazard of tasting, isn't it? I think that's also because that's been in the glass for a little while, so it's opened up. I think this will smell the same. Actually, your one now smells really good after a few minutes in the glass.
Is it?
Yeah, I'm now thinking I should have done your recipe. Oh well. Are you nearly there?
No. Wildly out. 3. 12. That should be that. Coastal and peaty. Plus 3. Should be 4 in that. Should be 3.5. Right. Oh yes, this is coming along now.
Oh, good.
3.5. Should be 9. Floral, last one.
While my dad is taking his time, part of the fun of this is actually putting a name to your blend, and then inviting people to taste it. I'll reveal the name of mine at the end. Hopefully, Dad will come up with something as well. Have you thought of a name at all, Dad?
I have, but it's probably copyrighted, so I'm thinking again.
Well, it doesn't matter. We're not actually going to make a commercial blend using your recipe, believe it or not. So that's not meant to be hurtful, Dad. That's just the plain truth.
All right. 4, 3. Yes, this is the last pipette's worth.
So one of the things that I always say to folks is that this is an exercise that doesn't have to stay in this room, in this studio, or whatever you want to call it. This is something you can have a go at, on various occasions. You might find in your cupboard, your drink cupboard or cabinet, or wherever you keep your whiskey, that you've got the dog ends of some okay whiskies, but perhaps there are some whiskies in there that you wouldn't miss quite so much as the others. Perhaps you've been given them on Father's Day, very nice gesture, but perhaps not your favorite whiskey. Why not create your own blend at home? There's many people I know of who do that very thing. So they'll have a house blend that they'll keep in a decanter, which might change over time, which they serve their guests as their own blended whiskey, which is just a bit of fun. But hopefully what you've seen through this exercise is that it is possible to create some really interesting flavors from individual whiskies that in themselves are quite interesting, but together become something even more. How are you doing, Dad?
This is finished, so what do I do with this now?
So you've got 80 ml?
Yes, nearly.
Great. Well, why don't you transfer that into the... Give it a little... put your hand on the top and give it a little... Get your hands dirty. There we go. Yum. Now, the measuring cylinder does have a little tip for pouring. It's easier than it looks, actually. So try and put 40 ml into. Are you not putting it into the bottles?
Yes, I'm going to put it into the bottles, but not the ones to roll. I'm just selecting.
Well, have you still got a little bit of the original sample that you made?
Yeah.
And have you got the two side by side?
Yes.
Well, why don't you nose them and taste them and see have you successfully managed to recreate the blend in a larger format? Or do they taste completely different?
They're both very nice. Yeah, I think they're spot on.
Okay. We do have to take into account that the first one has been exposed to the air for a bit longer, so it will have changed a bit in the course of the session.
Bottles now.
Yeah, well, you don't need to do that right now, Dad. You can do that when we've come off air. But what you can tell me is what the name is you've come up with for your whiskey.
Well, I thought it was going to be Flying Scotsman, but I think they've done it already. So I think Papyrus.
Okay. And what does that mean? Or what does that refer to?
Past is Class A3. The Flying Scotsman did 100 miles an hour, and the Papyrus did 108 miles an hour.
Right. Okay. Wow, I'm glad you took it so seriously. Right, well, I'm going to show you what I've called mine, and I think this might move you slightly. I'll bring it round to the camera.
Yeah.
Can you see that?
Blackmore Vale.
Right, so unlike my dad, who's chosen some random fast engine, I've chosen the name of an engine which he used to take me to see at the Bluebell Railway in one of our enjoyable outings, in which he took me to yet another railway thing. Yeah, I thought it was quite a good name for a whiskey, actually.
Yes.
Sounds kind of whiskey-ish, doesn't it?
Sounds artisanal.
Yes, it does. Or maybe we need to trademark that. Anyway, Dad, thank you for joining. Sorry you've missed your tea, but you could do losing a bit of weight anyway, so it's fine. I'm joking. You know I love you. But no, I do really appreciate you coming on. It has actually been fun. I hope everyone at home has enjoyed it. Don't forget, we've got one live session left, which is tomorrow at 5 p.m. UK time, which is the Desert Island Drams special edition. So don't miss out on that. That's going to be good fun. Otherwise, I will bid you bonsoir. And enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you. Slanj Dad, Slanj Var.
Au revoir, Slanj Var. Bye.
Bye bye.